So let me catch people up to speed very quickly. Essentially, Linda, who has helped to translate as well as create some books with George personally in the George R. R. Martin universe within Game of Thrones, has been accused of many things, including bigotry, racism, being combative with the fandom, so on and so forth. Having done additional research, I think there's no doubt she's a very snarky, combative, and very aggressive person online. She's made very clear that if you criticize her in a certain way, she will criticize you. She often uses very offensive language. So that is the context. And there are two sides to this as far as I can see. Her defense is people are cherry picking statements from a long time ago. The counter is very simple and very harsh, which is no, we're not picking statements from 20, 10, or even 5 years ago. We're picking statements from a month or 2 months ago or just 5 months ago. And that is a very different story. So this is not, we're trying to pick an obscure phrase you may have used back in 1995. Maybe, maybe not. Maybe that's what's happening. But perhaps the most offensive phrase, and again, I want to be careful, she said quite a lot of crazy things elsewhere, and I'm putting that up so people can do their own screenshots. And let's be clear, this is a partisan going through some of her worst statements and compiling them. This is kind of a clip file. We're all in this situation where if we're online or offline, we're all going to have skeletons in the closet. We're going to have moments where we were very harsh or angry, and we can just easily clip ourselves and choose our worst moments and say, well, that's that person. And clearly that's not representative. Is this representative of how she is all the time or most of the time? Don't know. But now let's get to the big discovery, and it is pretty damning. Whether we can conclude from this she is definitely a racist, I don't know. I don't think we could escape she definitely did use a racist phrase. So what happened? Well, essentially, in responding to someone, she basically used a very clever phrase. And a lot depends on the Swedish. Now, I want to give some background in terms of my knowledge of languages. It is a lot. I know Spanish fluently because I am Hispanic. That is my native language. My French is pretty fluent. My English is pretty fluent. German, I'm pretty strong on, but I need a little work. Chinese, intermediate, and I'm learning Greek and Latin, and that's ongoing. But I know a little bit there. So I know my languages, but I do not know Swedish, so take this with a grain of salt. I did take the phrase and used Google Translate, and it is pretty horrifying. So using the crude translation, it does come out to what you might think it does, namely the N word as used among Americans. Now, I'm not afraid to use that word, again, in this kind of context, but we all know YouTube and Google are a little weird with this kind of language, so I will just have to put it up. I've forewarned people this will have some explicit language, and there we are. Now, is this the end of the discussion? Well, a lot depends on translating that word and the context of Sweden and political culture and their languages. So I don't know if this is just a localism, and it could mean, and this is not much better, but maybe it means Negro ball. And you might think, where is this all coming from? Well, apparently they seem to have some kind of chocolate or candy. Basically, it's like this round chocolate thing. Whatever, it's a dessert, a candy, I don't know. I don't even know if this is local to Sweden or local to Europe or whatever it is. But anyway, it seems what she's doing is cleverly using the chocolate candy thing or whatever it is as basically a metaphor for black people or dark-skinned people. Now, that itself is not racist, but you can see what she's doing. She's trying to be clever. Now, it could mean, at the best interpretation, she meant something like Negro ball. Again, the Swedish language keeps evolving, and what is considered offensive keeps changing. That's not much better, but it is what it is. And I can say, for being Hispanic, to be fair, some people do refer to the word black using Negro or Negra. That is technically correct, depending on where you are. There are, quote, less offensive ways to refer to, quote, black people. I believe Moreno or Morena is acceptable. But again, I have to tell the truth, to be honest, to both sides. It depends on the community. Spanish generically can be learned if you're outside that community. But believe me, being from Central America and having interacted with people from South Africa, from South America, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean, all different kinds of peoples have different kinds of ways of using even the exact same word, and there are localisms like slang language that is not going to be carried over to the other countries. So it may sound offensive to you, it may sound offensive to me, but within that community, they don't care. Quote, the black people who are contextually there don't consider that offensive. We might do so, but not them. So I need to know more about Swedish culture and the way Swedish language is used. So we have to reach out to the Swedish fandom, and they will perhaps help us in this time of need. I will say on a final note, there is a word in Swedish for quote black. If she just wanted to refer to quote black people, she just could have used that word. Apparently, that word is svert. So there is kind of a neutral word in Swedish or Sweden that she could have used, but she didn't use that. So again, depending on your perspective, assuming worse intentions, yes, she was being racially offensive. She did use a derogatory word. And she even admitted, well, why are you using it this way? And she admitted, oh, she's using it in a way to sort of get up right close to the edge. She's not literally saying the word, but she's implying it. And again, given her other statements where she's not afraid to use words like cunt, motherfucker, fuck you, stupid, piece of shit, you go through the list, she's not afraid to use harsh language. So we can't escape that she's just been harsh. Depending on the situation, maybe that was warranted. She's just defending herself. I'm just doing a factual analytic analysis. That is it. So has she been caught using the N-word? Technically, yes, but we need to know a little bit more about Swedish culture and the Swedish language to be sure. I am an expert on fascism in Europe, and I am an expert in many languages, but I don't know enough about Sweden per se. I've studied it, but my knowledge is not extensive enough for me to say, give a kind of final judgment. All I can say, it's pretty disturbing and it is alarming, but people will have to decide for themselves if this is enough evidence to sort of exile her from the community and boycott the book and really urge George just cut off any ties. Now, and I want to stress this is her. Her quote partner might be fine. He might just be an innocent party, or he just turned a blind eye. That's a different discussion, but that is what I found out with Linda. And there we are. So people will have to decide for themselves if this is enough. Again, she said many crazy statements, but this is probably the worst. And again, there may be worse stuff we haven't discovered yet, but her defense is not correct. This is not people pulling from 10, 20 years ago. They are pulling from very recent time period, not even a year. So decide for yourself whether this is a real controversy or we're perhaps just being a little too sensitive about one minor language use. I do think, being a moderate, it is racist, but how racist and how racist is she? Don't exactly know, but the idea that we're just, trying to find a statement from 15 years ago to undermine her is just not true. This is very recent, and it's hard to believe she didn't know what she was talking about. And there we are with the recent controversy with Linda and the wider GOT fandom.